very much, everyone. I'm so nervous to be here in a room full of people. So let's start it with a traditional selfie if you want. But for this one, I would like to see all your hands up. Hands up. Hands up. Okay. And now say Barcelona. Yeah, that's it. Cool. Thank you very much. So I'm not only nervous because it's maybe the first presentation I have with so many people after 2 years of pandemics, but also because of the fact that I see that people still consider security an important aspect. Security is, whether I say it or not, whether others say it or not, a paramount component that we should take into consideration from the very beginning of building a system. And it's great that a lot of you, I see more and more people attending security presentation. Maybe it's because people remember about December 2021 or something. Okay, my mic. Okay, oh, excellent. So let's start with the beginning. Security is important, and I'm not going to discuss today about security like in general. I'm going to discuss about a specific part, component of Spring Security that created quite a fuss in the past couple of years, and I will explain why. By the way, how many of you do already know about the authorization server from Spring Security? So quite some people. I will explain for the others why this is a fuss. But before, let's go very fast through who I am, because I'm pretty sure you didn't come here for me, and if you did, then I'm still going to be here the next couple of days, plus the beer event. Most people know me because of my YouTube channel. You can subscribe or follow me on the social media. Some others know me because of the couple of books I wrote, and I'm actually writing a third one now. It will be renamed into probably Troubleshooting Java Apps, because it's about profiling and debugging, but that's another story. I prepared for you paper copy of my second book for one of you. So if you want, you can scan that QR code. I only need your full name and email address. And for the email address, I can assure you that I will delete the data right after the presentation to be GDPR compliant, and the email addresses will not be shown anywhere, so I will be the only one to see them, in case anyone wondered. I will put the code also at the very end, and I don't have only this book. I also have about 15 vouchers plus 10 tickets to the DevTalks Bucharest, where I moderate the Java stage, but they will be given at the end of the conference at the closing session. Cool. Spring Security. And even more than Spring Security, the new authorization project is basically the subject we discussed today. It created a lot of fuss for those of you who don't know, because a couple of years ago we used to build authorization servers, resource servers, and everything that's part of what we call OAuth in general, using the project that was called, now is deprecated, Spring Security OAuth. So the project has been deprecated meanwhile, and while a part of the functionality has been implemented built into Spring Security itself, like the resource server, the login, the client, the authorization server hasn't been actually put anywhere. So by deprecating the Spring Security OAuth project, the part of the community who was actually building custom authorization servers with Spring didn't have anymore a chance to use a project that is not deprecated. So basically you had the possibility to use a third party, such as Keycloak, if you want something open source. Maybe you could use something like Okta or some other provider, again a third party. You could implement it from scratch. You could use a deprecated project, but there was no other solution. So what happens is that about 1 year ago, the Spring Security team started implementing a new authorization server to be compliant with OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect, which is a protocol over OAuth 2. So I do expect that you have some knowledge about OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect for this presentation. I will not go into all the details, but what we will do is we will build together the simplest possible authorization server using this solution, which is now starting yesterday, version 0.30. and I will use the latest version, even though it was released yesterday. So in case you see me failing, that might be a reason. Even if it's 0.0.30, so it starts with a 0, the major version is 0, that doesn't mean it's not production ready. It has been declared production ready starting version 0.2.0, which is about 6 months ago. And the reason, and first of all, in case you will need, I will put on Twitter the slides afterwards, but I wanted to make a bit of marketing to the project as well. Maybe some of you want to write some code for open source, then it will be highly appreciated by the community if you can put your work there. Secondly, you don't have to read that. It's just print screened from one of the links that you have seen previously. I wanted just to mention that 0.2.0 started to be considered production ready, but the reason is 0 is not because you shouldn't use it in production, it is because it's not aligned yet with Spring's policy. So it will be aligned with Spring's policy starting with version 1. Meanwhile, you need to be careful because whenever something changes here, so when 2 changes to 3, for example, as stated in the policy, you might have breaking changes between. So that's very important to know. If you do choose to start using, for the moment, this project, you have to be careful and attentive and knowledgeable about the policy. So do read it in detail when after the conference, if you want and have the time. But I wanted to mention this as being, from my perspective, the most important aspect of the policy. And you can see here that less than 24 hours ago, we have version 0.3.0. It's not even published officially on Maven yet, but I will show you how to take it. But before trying it, let's make sure that we discuss just a few of the contracts. And then, of course, while coding them, I will explain. What we will do is we'll test the authorization server using the simplest, but maybe the most relevant grant type in OAuth, which is the authorization code grant type. Very quick, we will use the Pixie version, and that means that we will send a verifier and a check on the calls, and this one basically, and this one that requests the token. And the idea is very simple. So the user wants to use something from the client. The client redirects the user to the authorization server. This is what we build. The authorization server sends a code called authorization code. The client uses the authorization code to get the access token, which is basically, in case you use OpenID Connect, is the ID token. And then you get a token, and then the client can access the resources on the resource server, which is basically the backend. So it's the simplest and then the most known of the flows. We will use JSON Web Token, which is not necessarily theoretically not mandatory to use as a token, but to be honest with you, it's 100% what we use today when we discuss OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. And about the contracts, you will see me coding a register client and the register client repository, which is basically the contracts that the authorization server used to recognize the client details, everything that's related to client details in the previous project. Did anyone here use the Spring Security OAuth, the previous project? Okay, so in that project, we named this the client details and the client details service, which are basically synonymous to user details service and the user details that are the user's contracts from Spring Security. Now they are called the register client and the register client repository. We will need to use the provider settings that gives the details about the endpoints for the authorization server. And in case, and most likely, we will use an asynchronous key pair, we will need to provide the key source, which is basically the object the bean Spring will use and the project will use behind the scenes to define the key pair. So let's try it actually, because I don't want to bother you a lot. I'm just going to go first of all. Okay, a lot of you already registered. We'll take that at the end. So this is the page of the project. This is the announcement for 0.3.0 yesterday, 25th of May. If you will go to Maven, you will see 030 is not even here yet, but trust me, it will work. So we will be able to use 030. And that being said, I think we just can go and start our presentation. Let's create a Spring project. How do we call it? So Authorization Server Spring IO. We use Java 17, which is the latest long-term supported. And then we will only need the web dependency and the Spring Security dependency. We don't have the possibility of using a reactive approach yet, in case you are wondering. By the way, if you have questions, please just raise your hand. So do interrupt me if you have any question. You don't have to wait up to the end of the presentation, just ask. And we create the project, and of course, first of all, we don't have a starter yet for Spring Boot. We will have to add the dependency from Maven. So that's why what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one from here, but I will use 030. So copy it here and use 030. I'm usually reloading projects so that I'm sure all the jars will be downloaded in my local repository. And then we will start by defining the configuration classes. So I'm usually creating a config package for that. And in the config package, the first important thing is to make sure that we have the user details, because the authorization server authenticates the users, so you need the users. And for the users, fortunately, we have Spring Security, so we don't have to use something special. It's just the user details service contract you already know. We will call it web security config. So here in the web security config, which is a configuration class, so I'm going to put a configuration annotation. I'm going to say user detail service. And add the bin, and then I'm going to say I'm going to use an in-memory user. Of course, usually you would get them from a database or something, but let's make the thing simple. So just say user with username, Bill, some password. I will use plain text again just to make sure we have the time to be there, to create everything. We need at least an authority, otherwise it will fail. And then we build the user details. So what else do we need? Well, do we need actually a user details service, and I'm going to use the in-memory user details manager for that, and return it. So this is nothing special. This is only normal Spring Security. Of course, the password encoder. I will use the password encoder as the no-op password encoder, which is not something you are allowed to use in a production application. So in a production application, you'd probably use bcrypt or something similar. But again, to avoid having to encode the password here to make the demonstration, I will use the no password encoder, which is marked as deprecated and crossed with a line because you shouldn't use it. It's not encoding anything. What else do we need here? So we also need the security filter chain. So security filter chain, for those of you who are not aware yet, we don't use anymore extends web security configurer adapter. That was the way, the approach up to maybe 3 months ago or something like that. Maybe some of you are customized to that. You were extending web security configurer adapter, and then we were overriding the configure method. What we do now is we define a security filter chain bin, and we will just, this HTTP security will be provided from the context. So I'll call it HTTP security HTTP. What does it say here? Could not no bins found. Don't trust, it's only IntelliJ, you trust me. That one is working. And what we do here is say HTTP form login, because we will need a page that the authorization server provides to the user when it's redirected. Now you have to put your username and password there, and say and authorize requests, and just say any request should be authenticated. and build. And of course, this one throws an exception, so we put it up there. So that's the simplest for just having the users. And now, same as we have users, we need to have the client credentials, which is the client contracts I was showing you earlier on the slide. You go here and you say authorization server config. Let's call it like this. And then it's configuration class. And then what we will have to do is basically, because now we do use Spring Boot, but this is not yet mature enough to be part of Spring Boot. That's why, as I said earlier, it's not one in front of the version. We will have to manually declare the configurations with a new filter, with an additional filter that we will define basically in the same way. We don't need all this actually, but what I'm going to do is use a utilitary class that's provided by the project, which has the static method apply default security. So in the future, we expect this will not be needed anymore. It will be somehow hidden by Spring Boot. But for the moment, we don't have another chance. So we need to apply it ourselves. And to make sure it's correctly applied, I will even place it as being the highest precedence ordered. Okay, and now that we applied the configurations for the authorization server, we need to have the client, register client and register client repository. So let's do that. Say public registered client repository, register client repository, which will be a bin in the Spring context. And we know we need a registered client. And we create this one. Pretty easy in a builder approach. With ID, this is not a client ID. It's a bit strange, but this is an internal identifier. So I'm going to simply use just a random unique identifier for this. The client ID, which is the external ID, is basically what the client will use to identify. So these are the username and the password of the client, which we call client ID and client secret. We can simply leave them like this. What else do we need here? So we need a grant type, of course, and we said that we are going to test the authorization code grant type. We need an authentication method, and this one is mandatory for the authorization code grant type, and I will use HTTP basic. We need a scope, of course, so I will just choose one of the scopes from OpenID Connect. Let's say OpenID, and of course we need a redirect URI. Let's just put here Spring IO. And I think that's everything we need. Of course, that page doesn't exist, but we don't care because we'll be able to see that it redirects to the page, and we will copy the authorization code manually and then put it in Postman to check the whole flow. So we just return here new in memory, and in memory register client repository. Again, usually this information would come from a database. The contracts are very simple. So if you, sorry, not this one. This one, if you go here, you will see that there are 3 methods that you would basically have to override, and you implement it with JPA, with JDBC, with whatever you want there to get the information you need. So it's pretty simple. It's based on everything based on interfaces, based on contracts. So I'm here using some implementations provided by the project. Very simple for a demonstration like this one. In the real world, it would be same easier because you would just have to code an implementation of this interface and tell the project where to take the client information from. What else do we need? So I just said I need the client, and then of course I need the keys. And then I need the provider settings. So the provider settings is the easiest. The provider settings, which I think in the future will also be part of Spring Boot anyway. That means this bin will not necessarily be customized all the time. You will just have to edit only if you want to change one of the endpoints. So we just say provider settings builder build, which is the default. So we get the defaults. If you go into the provider settings, what you will see is that it defines basically the token endpoint, the keys endpoint, the authorization, the issuer endpoint, all the endpoints needed from the OAuth 2 specification or OpenID Connect protocol specification. So that's why I'm defining this min. But again, it's only needed to, so I need now to define it because I don't have someone putting it for me, but in the future probably it will be auto-configured by Spring Boot, and then I will have to put this one only if I literally want to change the endpoints myself for some reason. So, and then JUK source is what I need. Okay. So this is the key source, so I cannot skip this one, otherwise I would not have a key pair to sign the tokens, the JV tokens. We will need that asynchronous key pair that we will define. So how do we create the key source? Well, it's a simple interface, again, very simple, a method with 2 parameters, and what it requires is basically you apply, sorry, it's the other way around, is that you apply the set called, which is basically called the key set. And I define the key set here, which is the collection of keys, because you can have multiple keys, multiple key pairs. So that's why I need a set, and I don't need only one key. And then of course I need to define the key, because this key set is just a collection, it doesn't have the keys. So to do that, I usually prefer to separate. Am I missing something here? It's only this. Yeah, this is the same problem, but I'm pretty sure it's only IntelliJ. Anyway, so I'm going to define a separate class. Let's say keys package, and then I can call it, say, key manager. And in the key manager, which is basically only a very simple normal component, I have a method that gives me an RSA key, which is not this RSA key, actually, it's a different one. It's this one. Okay. So let me actually add a return null here for the moment and go back to completely finalize this class. So not public, private, final, key manager, it's called in my case, key manager. Yes, I have to define a constructor. Lombo could be good here. And then I say key manager RSA key. That's basically how I'm just adding a key in the set. So I have a set with one item that's defining the key source. Pretty easy. Of course, now I have to finish the implementation. So how do I do that? Key pair generator is the easiest way probably to generate an RSA key pair. If you know a better one, let me know, but that's how I know. The Java security package, I always found it ugly because of these checked exceptions and because of the way it's using the code, but that's not our purpose for today's talk. Let me just do here, throw new runtime exception, and of course never use runtime exception like I do here, so this is not a production ready code. What do I need? I do need to initialize the key. I do need to generate the key pair. This is the key pair. Key pair. And then of course what we know here is that we have a public key, which should be of type RSA public key, and of course RSA private key for the other, for the pair. So we call it public key, but I will again have to do something very ugly I don't like. I will have to actually, from the key pair, cast the public and the private key. But yeah, it will work because I know I generate an RSA key, so just to spend time to add the instance of and stuff like that. But again, don't do that in your production code. So private key, and the same I will do here, just a small cast, and it's working. Private, otherwise it's not working. And we return an RSA key. It's actually an instance, and let's use the builder based on the public key, private key, and we need a key identifier as well. I can literally put anything here, but let's do it like this. And of course build, because it's a builder. Too ugly, let's put it. Okay, better now. That's basically everything. So if version 030 works as expected, I hope it does, this should work as well. So not really. So I have, oh, this is easy. I just copy-paste it. See, copy-paste programming, never do that. So I just copy-pasted the same name here. So just change the name of the bin, because otherwise you can't have multiple bins with the same name in the context. Okay. And it's working, so the assumption that this problem here is IntelliJ is right. And now what shall we do is just, I prepared the links here because I don't want to write them. I will use the authorize, so that what the client does is when the user needs to access, I'm maybe going back to my diagram again. So here it is. So when the user needs to access something, the client redirects, this is a redirect to the page of the authorization server. So that's authorize, that's the first link you see there. And then the second link you see there is this one, because once we get the code, the authorization code, after logging in, we will call the token endpoint, and then we get the access token, and then the access token is basically what the resource server can use. Okay, that's why we need the two links. And because they are quite long, I didn't want to actually write them by hand now, but the idea is very simple. So let me explain the links step by step. They are according to the OAuth 2 specification, for which you can find the RFC. We need, on the authorize, we specify the response type code, which actually means the authorization code grant type is the intention of using the authorization code grant type. Then we use the client ID, which we named client. We tell the authorization server who we are, which is the application that's creating the intent. The scope, and of course the scope should be one of the supported scopes. But if I remember correctly, it is. So that's what I've added. So client, secret, authorization code, authentication via HTTP basic, OpenID, and Spring OAuth. This information needs to be correct. So OpenID, then Spring OAuth, and the code challenge, which is part of the PXE. So what happens here, and going back to my diagram, what happens here is that when we send the authorized code, here is what we send is a hash, a SHA-256 hash over some random string. So what the client does is generating a 32 bytes string, and then it hashes it. The first string, the randomly generated one, is called the verifier. The second one is the challenge. Here we send the challenge. We send a hashed string. So if someone intercepts this call, they will get the string, but being hashed, you know that the hash function is not reversible. So that means even if I intercept this call, I cannot get the verifier. I don't know how to get the verifier because I cannot reverse the SHA-256. So then when I will do the second call, I send the verifier, which is the unhashed string, the one randomly generated. And that's how I prove that I am the same client who initiated this call. Otherwise someone could go in between the calls and get the token, which is something we don't want because it's called the bearer token for a reason. It's because if you have the token, you can do anything you want. Okay, so that's basically why I have this challenge. I previously generated them to spend some time now, because I used to talk a lot. It's already half an hour gone. And then we have the method, the hashing method, because you can have here plain, but that's something that I don't even understand why it exists. So you can have here plain, meaning you have the verifier and the challenge being the same string. But that would mean you can still intercept them and get a token. So that's SHA-256. And then when we will use the token endpoint, you will again have the client, you have the redirect URI, you have the grant type, authorization code, that's what we do. We have the authorization code that we got by calling the authorized endpoint. and we have the code verifier, which is the unhashed version. So this is the hash of this one, hash and base64 encoded. Okay, so that's basically it. So let me actually copy now this one. How do I copy it easier here? Can I? And put it in the browser. Okay, it asks me to log in. You see the normal form login. That's why I configured form login. So what was it? Bill and 12345? Let's check to make sure, because I'm an old man. Bill 12345. Okay, that should work. Sign in. And of course 404, because Spring IO doesn't have that page, which is what we expected. But if you look here, we see that indeed we got the code. So that's the authorization code. Okay? So I'm just simply copying the authorization code. I can use it only once. Even if I fail, I will not be able to use again the authorization code. So when I'm going to the post here, which is basically the endpoint you've seen, I'm just going to replace this code with my new one. I'm going to press the send button, and what you see in the response is the access token. I only have the access token and the ID token. I have the ID token because I'm using one of the OpenID scopes. I still have the access token because OpenID Connect is built on top of OAuth 2. I don't have a refresh token because I didn't configure the refresh token grant type, but if I would configure the refresh token grant type, I would have here also a refresh token I can use. And if you want to take a deeper look into this code, into this token, you can simply use, I like to use jwt.io and paste it here, and that's basically, so you see in the header the key ID, the algorithm, and some details that are also customizable. I won't show now how to customize it, but you can trust me, it's customizable. The way the token looks like is customizable. And the key ID, this key ID is basically the key ID that we set, that random unique identifier. But what you can do to prove that the token has the key is indeed the key pair identified with this key ID, E8326 is, if you go here in the well-known endpoint of the OpenID configuration, where you see all the endpoints, one of the endpoints should be the key set endpoint. This is the one. So I'm going to copy it and call it, and you see E8326. Yeah, probably not very easy for you to spot it, but I can do something like this. So this is the same key ID as we have in the header of the token. So basically, this is what I wanted to show you. Okay, this opened in browser. And this is the future for what we call the authorization server. So I didn't see any question throughout the talk, although, okay, two of them. Let's take them in order, okay, order of those, keep in mind. So I have a question here. No, second row here I have. Okay, the microphone, please. Meanwhile, before the question, this is a discount code for any Manning product, if you want to use it. I will put it afterwards if you want on the presentation. And again, for this book, as well as for the other vouchers that we will give at the closing session, I have the other code that I will basically leave it here for the rest of the presentation. So while I'm answering the questions.
Yeah. So one question is my question is about it's about the code actually.
Okay.
You had two configurations. In one configuration with the security supplier chain, you did HTTP at the moment form login enable, and then you had a second configuration when you did again HTTP form login enable. Is this on purpose, or why do you need to enable the form login 2 times?
That's a good question actually. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's needed to put the form login twice. So I just did on
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Maybe
but the idea of the two methods, to understand why we have those two methods, so one of them applies the authorization server configurations that will be hidden sometime in the future, and you will only have to create your own filter, okay? Yeah. Cool. And we had a question there in the back, I guess.
I had a question.
Yes. So.
What is the role of JWT source?
So the role of the JWT source. What is the role of the JWT source? To sign the tokens, we need a key pair, an RSA key pair, which is composed of the public and the private key. An authorization server can configure multiple keys. So sometimes we configure multiple keys to rotate the keys we use to sign the tokens. So we will have multiple key pairs that are used. The private key is used to sign the token. The public key is what you saw when we call the endpoint. And it's what the resource server uses to validate that the signature is correct. The key source is the bean that the authorization server uses to get all the keys, so the entire key set. So it's the manager of the key set, of the set of the keys. So when we create the key source, the authorization server will use the key source. The key source contains the set of all the key pairs, and in our case, we only added one key for the demonstration.
And how do resource server knows which public key to use?
Very good question. So I didn't get into that detail indeed, but the resource server needs to validate somehow the token. So the question is, how does the resource server know how to validate the token? Well, when we generated the token, we saw that in the header, we have the key ID. So what the resource server actually does is it takes the key ID from the header and then calls the key set, which offers the set of all the public keys. So here we have only the public part of the key, and identifies the key using the key ID. Okay? Thank you also. Yes, one question here. Or you can shout if you. I think it already has an introspection endpoint, but to be honest with you, I did write some code for this project. To be honest with you, in the past months, I didn't have the time to do that anymore, so I'm a little bit deprecated with absolutely everything that has been deployed. So I don't want to say anything wrong, but we can check here. So they have the user info, and I'm not sure we have an introspection endpoint, but I'm pretty sure if it isn't already, which again, I don't know for sure, it will be. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Have a question there?
Okay, so token JWT has none algorithm for signing and it has vulnerability. So is this supported by default?
So I'm not sure if I understood the question, but so you say the JWT token has a vulnerability?
Yeah, it has one claim alg, which basically states what signing algorithm should be used for.
The RSA, yes.
Yeah. So basically, if you pass down none, it should ignore the third part of the token. So is this supported by default?
So I'm pretty sure it should be supported. I have to be honest with you, I didn't test that, but I would be surprised if it isn't.
Because if you intercept the token, then basically you
I understand what you say. You just can quit the signature and then it will be considered valid. So I'm pretty sure that's not the case with the new authorization server.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Although we had problems even in Log4j in December, so who knows? Can't be sure about anything. Do we have
a way to manage the refresh token or the authorization token?
Yes, we have the refresh token actually, and we have possibilities to configure them. I didn't show. I can quickly show you where you have the client, where you define the register client. So here you have client settings and token settings. So these two methods basically allow you to set all the settings you need on the token and on the client. Yeah, exactly. So on the token settings here, if you use token settings, you will see that you can even define the expiration time. Refresh token time to leave, access token time to leave. Of course, you don't have everything complete yet because it's version 0.3.0. So I expect some of the things that even things that you had in the Spring Security OAuth, the deprecated project, they are not there yet, but they will be. Yes?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So I can see that we are at a very early stage of this project. I'm wondering why we are restarting this initiative of authorization server, and is there going to be any additional value, like when comparing to current solutions like Keycloak, Okta, etc.?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you very much. So this is the fact that it's being restarted is not something I can answer about because I'm not leading this project. So I'm just a committer on the project. So I don't want to answer that for the team. But I'm pretty sure, first of all, above Keycloak and other solutions, yes, it's the only way you can easily implement a custom, your own authorization server. So in terms of what they do, well, you basically still have the same OAuth 2 specification implemented and OpenID Connect protocol implemented. So it won't bring something new above that. But is the way you can implement your own, you can easily implement your own authorization server without needing at all a third party, because that's the idea of the project, and that's why it was requested by the community. I'm not sure, again, why was it restarted and they didn't continue on the existing one. Probably because, yeah, anyway on over that one you had to add a lot of functionality for OpenID Connect and the OAuth 2, and maybe it made a lot more sense to simply have it from scratch and deprecate completely the existing one. But I don't want to answer for the team on that. Thank you very much. Yes, one more question. Again, I'm not sure I can answer that, but as a developer and as a software consultant and as a security enthusiast, I do encourage security audits frequently. So I can't say if the team plans or not to have that, but I can encourage them publicly to do that, especially because I've entered on the GitHub just a few moments ago, and well, where was it? So we have some CVs already here reported by GitHub, so you know what I mean. Cool. Thank you.
Can you define the clients using properties, or is that only programmatically?
For the moment, only programmatically, because being version 0.3.0, the latest, it's not supported by Spring Boot, but probably when version 1, the image version 1 will be introduced, you will have the beans that I've configured manually, the default configuration will be part of Spring Boot, and then we will have properties in the properties for YAML file. Okay? Any other curiosities or discussions? Otherwise, I will just take 2 more minutes to find out who gets this book. And for the other prizes, I will leave them for the closing session. And if you want to discuss more with me on any topic, as I said, you can find me on social media, live on YouTube very frequently, and today and tomorrow here, including the beer event in the evening. So I will go now to the page that displays your names, guys. I've hidden on purpose the email addresses to be GDPR compliant. So we have starting with 4 and ending with, oh my god, 178. So 4 to 178, because the first 2 are my tests. 4 to 178. Oh, sorry. So 4 to 178, and we have number 120. So number 120 is Louis Thompson. Okay, I will find you here after the presentation, Luis. Thank you very much. Since there are no other questions, then I say thank you very much, everyone, for attending the presentation. Muchísimas gracias. Merci a tous. Obrigado.